The story of Yars' return is one of love. Love of the original Howard Scott Warshaw game Yars' Revenge, love of the original Atari VCS, and love for the homebrew community as it was developing in the early 2000s. Yars' Return was originally programmed by homebrew developer and Atari Museum founder Curt Vendel for the Atari Flashback 2 plug-and-play console in 2004. It debuted on that all-in-one along with Saboteur and Aquaventure, two unreleased Atari prototypes to go along with a wholly new Atari 2600 game. At the time, it was a pretty big deal. Not only was it a new game, but it came in a device that was to that point unprecedented in quality, look, and relative catalog depth. We now look at the Flashback consoles maybe as something filling yearly space in Dollar Generals and Walmarts, but the Flashback 2 emulated the 2600 better than had been available previously, and it sold more than 860,000 units, according to Vendel in an interview with The Escapist in 2007. 2004 was a big year for Atari fans, and the work done during this time laid the foundation for the digital condition of Atari's catalog today. Vendel's contributions to retro gaming history and preservation are immense, and the Atari community mourned his passing at the age of 53 in 2020. Even though Yars' Return's release on the Flashback 2 was a big deal, it didn't play very well and suffered from significant bugs. That prompted fellow game programmer and Atari enthusiast Debro to work with Vendel to fix things up for subsequent releases. Debro has since become the driving force behind updating Yars' Return over the years, including for this new Atari XP release. This new release of Yars' Return is important as it corrects a serious bug that plagued the game even as recently as Atari Flashback Classics on the Nintendo Switch. The bug is that the lower missile doesn't actually kill you. Debro says, however, he didn't stop there when asked to update the game. The shield graphic is now solid rather than interlaced, and a proper title screen has been added with text and gameplay options. Finally, the Easter egg was corrected to give credit to Warshaw, as in the original. You'll notice this video doesn't show a solid shield, and I'll have more on that in a bit. Atari took orders for Yars' Return late last year. Both the $50 standard and $150 limited editions sold out, and were delivered in late August of this year. The standard edition suffers from the same issue as the Aquaventure and Saboteur standard editions, in that they won't play on actual hardware due to the PCB being flipped. Atari is currently in the process of replacing these cards. The reason this matters is that because the standard editions don't work, the only current way to play this updated ROM on original Atari hardware is through the limited edition. And that means we've been dependent on someone opening up their $150 collector's box, popping in the cart, and capturing the video for YouTube to compare the cart with the ROM released on the VCS. Yars' Return's ROM on the VCS is supposed to be the Atari XP version of the game, but it isn't. Missing are the bug fixes with one important exception, that being in this Atari OS ROM both missiles do in fact kill you. This means the ROM released in Atari OS must be from a slightly earlier XP build, since it's clearly updated from the most recent prior release, which continued to have the missile bug. Not seeing a solid shield is a bummer, but not that big of a deal, and neither really is the lack of a menu screen nor corrected Easter egg. But here's hoping Atari gets an updated ROM on the VCS. Comparing this ROM to the cart proved difficult as I didn't buy the physical release, and so far I've just seen this one video by Gen X Grown Up to compare it with. Thank you very much, Gen X, for being willing to open the game and get the video on YouTube. Yars' Return was already on the VCS in Atari Vault Volume 2, but the Vault 2 version is an earlier iteration with more intense colors, harsher sound, and earlier bugs. Much of this may be due to the emulator rather than the game data itself, but playing Yars' Return in Vault Volume 2 is a clearly inferior experience. Even if the VCS ROM isn't as updated as it should be, the improvements made to the game are significant, and the game plays and looks as good as it has ever played. Whether Yars' Return is a, quote, good game is a tough call. In some ways, the game's just not nearly as good as the original Yars' Revenge, nor is it different enough to stand on its own. All of the updates make things worse. The relative open space of the original is replaced with a cramped environment, the ion field has been wrapped around a now-in-the-bottom-center Coteal base and gets in the way, and the Zorlon cannon that was a heck-yeah moment in the original as it blasted the Coteal instead frequently plants itself in your back, because you triggered it immediately upon acquisition and were in the middle of firing a shot. Which side the Zorlon cannon spawns matters too, as the shield around the Coteal can now be attacked from two sides, so you'll want to get to the side opposite the cannon prior to firing it. The decision to essentially mirror the base in the middle of the screen means each side operates independently. Moving shield damage doesn't cut across the shield, but rather one half of it. Finally, trying to move a near-damaged shield sometimes flings you into the center of the base or elsewhere, often killing you in the process. That said, Yars' Return is also a game that grew on me, and I've come to appreciate it quite a bit more than when I started making this video. It may not be a great improvement on the original Yars Revenge, but it is an interesting take, and its first ever physical release is something worth cheering. We're in a full-on Yars revival in 2022 apparently, with this XP release, the release last month of Yars Recharged, and the announcement by Howard Scott Warshaw himself in an interview with Gamer Braves that he's signed a deal with Atari to do a, quote, actual HSW Yars Revenge sequel, unquote. With the release of this new Yars and Saboteur, the battle between the Coteal Empire, Yarians, and Centonians hasn't been this hot since the Reagan era. Thanks for watching. I'll have more videos in the coming weeks, including Space Grunts, MS-DOS games, and more. Liking helps spread the word about the channel, and subscribing gets these videos in your feed. Have fun!